Okay.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome back to the check-in. This is episode 17, and it's only the second one of 2020. It's been a bit of a tumultuous year for us so far. I'm joined again by Errol Hartley and Pastor Mike Rutter. Yeah, welcome guys. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
it's
Mark.
I'm actually used to having Wednesday church on a Wednesday, and the nice thing about Wednesday church is during June and July we always have soup available. And Laura Vocht used to make this soup for us. I tell you, it was out of this world, and that's what I miss almost more than anything else. But it's good to be here again.
Great.
Well, I sleep anyway. My wife made me this evening, so
Okay.
it must be Wednesday night.
Okay. Yeah.
Soup
Yeah.
sounds really good with, I mean, the temperatures really dropped this last week, eh? Winter's
Let me tell
announced
you.
with a bang.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you just have to excuse me with my headdress, because as you all know, I have a bald patch, and I lose incredible body temperature through that bald patch, and I don't have any hair to put there, unlike Mike. So I've got to put a hat on. Just have to excuse me, please.
Also, it stops the glare from the light.
Yeah, that it does as well. Yeah, you're right, Mike.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly been an interesting time. I mean, since the last time we had the check-in, that was just
Yeah.
before sort of lockdown that we had that.
Mm.
And obviously the whole coronavirus thing has come through. But I've been really impressed with kind of how the church corporate, the body of the church, the people have sort of responded to this lockdown and caring for each other. And I mean, we've had this sort of, the food parcel scheme, just a phenomenal response. People caring for each other. It's really done my heart so much good just to see that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's for sure.
It's been a fantastic witness for the church, especially to people who are unchurched and were receiving food parcels. Just listening to Errol and Trevor talking, the opportunities they had in delivering these parcels, and then being able to pray for these families and seeing sometimes the emotion in some of these families at receiving a gift when they least expected it and from whom they least expected it. I think that's been a great witness to our Lord and Savior that we've done.
Yeah. It was a very unique kind of experience for me, because there were these two extreme emotions. On the one hand, there was just the pleasure of getting out, seeing people, speaking to people, being able to bless them with a food parcel. But at the same time, we saw some need there that just broke your heart. And I just realized I don't think we're aware of the full economical impact that this coronavirus has had on our community, where people just lost their jobs, and they had very menial sort of incomes, and no money, no food, nothing. I tell you, some of it was heartbreaking. But as Mike said, it was a real testimony to people, and that's why Trevor and I actually went and delivered the parcels personally. We wanted to go to their homes. We wanted to be able to speak to them, look them in the eye, find out what their situation is like, and then really just pray for them. And I think that was a good part of it.
Yeah, and of course there's been the whole shift in how we actually do church as well. This whole move to be having to do everything online, and we miss that one-on-one interaction. Hugging people. It's so second nature. I can't wait for the day that I could just hug someone.
Yeah.
But we're also reaching an audience that we ordinarily wouldn't have reached, with this online church. And I think that's something that we can thank the Lord for, because I'm aware of many people who have listened to our services who didn't come before, and now are getting the message because it's coming straight into their home.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot that's positive too from this.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just having a look on the stream here. We've got 12 or 13 people on so far, so watching us live. If you're watching us live, welcome. Great to have you here. Give us a like down the bottom here. Yeah, maybe mention who's watching in the chat, and we'll say hi quickly. It's also been really nice that we've had to innovate really in how we communicate. And one of the big ones we're seeing now is Trevor's devotions in the morning, and just the phenomenal response that's getting.
Incredible.
And the reach that it's getting as well. I mean, it's really going all over the world.
Yeah.
It's great for us, for our church congregation, but it's reaching far and wide as well.
Yeah.
And of course, he's chatting through Proverbs, which is such a significant, has so much great content. We could put a year in that and not cover the first 2 chapters.
Yeah. No, Proverbs is a very interesting book. It's a very unique sort of a book as well. We're not used to this in sort of English literature at all. We don't really have what could be termed wisdom literature. And of course, that was an important part of the Bible. The original Hebrew Bible is divided up into 3 sections. They call the whole Bible the Tanakh. And that's just an acrostic for the 3 portions that they recognize. The first one being the Torah, the first 5 books of Moses, the law. The second part being the Nebuchim, that's the prophets, and they have all the prophetic literature there, including, incidentally, books like Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings. They were written by the prophets. And so they were considered prophetic literature because they're busy interpreting the significance of the history of the nation and what happened to them. And then, of course, you've got the writings, the third part, the K and the Kanak. And the writings were the non-prophetic writings. And they included things like Psalms and the wisdom literature, which included Job. Job is considered to be part of the wisdom literature. And then, of course, Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. And then you have a little bit of a romantic thing in the Song of Solomon's and stuff like that. But also in the writings, you have 1 and 2 Chronicles, and much to the disgust of the end time prophets, Daniel. Daniel was never considered to be a prophet by the Hebrews. And these books were put in there because they were written by non-prophets. The Ezra, Nehemiah, and 1 and 2 Chronicles were written by the priests. That's why you get these long genealogies found in there. That was the priest's function, to keep track of who fits in who in the nation. But Proverbs is an amazing book. It really is. I remember my dad gave me a Bible. It was a Schofield Bible, Schofield Reference Bible. Schofield was very popular in those days. I'm dating myself now. I was about 16 years of age when I got this Bible. And he pointed out to me that there were 31 chapters in the book of Proverbs. And he suggested to me that every month that had 31 days in, I read through the book of Proverbs 1 chapter a day. And for many years I did that. And a lot of that stuff sticks. And a lot of that stuff is really good. And I've just so enjoyed what Trevor has been sharing, starting with the ant and the sluggard and going on from there. It's really been most encouraging. Now, I've even noticed that my granddaughter has been listening to his devotions on a daily basis and benefiting from them. So it's been a great thing. It really has been. And if there are people who are listening to this podcast who are not picking up on the devotions, I would encourage you to do so. It's just short. What do they last for? About 10, 12 minutes, maybe even less. And it's always a good thought that Trevor shares. Really, it is.
Well, we'll see. We've got Mike Willemse. He says, "Hi, Errol and Mike. Good to see you guys again."
Yeah.
Again, he likes your hat.
Thank you. Yeah.
And we've got Greg Beck who's got a question as well. When we get to that. Um, yeah, he's got a question around the sort of family side of things. Let's introduce that then. So Mike, you've been doing the Happy Homes for us on Facebook and now through WhatsApp as well. Do you want to give us a bit of the motivation of why that's important to you?
Okay. Well, the family has always been very important to me, and I've watched over years of ministry what happens when the family disintegrates. I have seen men and women who have been involved in Christian ministry, and when the family comes apart, they come apart. Their ministries come apart.
Yeah.
It's so much an integral part of all that we are, and I am passionate about the family, and particularly about the role of men, fathers, in the family. And when we went into lockdown, we all started seeing the news of gender-based violence, but not just gender-based violence, just violence in general. Frustrated people in lockdown, taking it out on their wives, taking it out on their children, parents getting irritated with their kids, and that kind of thing. And I was asked by a couple of people in the church, wouldn't I do something on the family? Knowing my views on the family, and that's how it came about. And so realizing that there aren't a lot of, well, there are some happy homes, but there were many that weren't happy. I decided to just call the series Happy Homes under that broad title, and then develop various themes, which I've been doing over the past number of weeks, trying to do it just a section at a time, so that it's not too much to digest in one go.
Yeah. I must say, just from personal observation, the tremendous knock-on effect of a good father role model is incredible. It's not limited just to within the family, although obviously that's where most of the effect is. But it's inspirational to those around as well. I watch my brother. He's an amazing, an incredible dad. I have so much respect and time for him, and seeing how he parents motivates me to be a better parent. I think that there's just tremendous value in men taking charge, taking responsibility, taking on that mantle of being a good father. And of course, the role model that we have is God. He is the good father.
I've seen, in my own life, just the piece I did today, my father modeled for me. I watched him, and my mom too, for that matter, but they modeled for me what it was like to be generous and to care about other people. My father had an incredible compassion for lost people, but for all people, I can remember many times stopping on the side of the road. Somebody was broken down. My dad would never go past him. He'd stop and he'd help them. And if necessary, I can remember many times my brother and I had to sleep in one bed because we had somebody come home that needed a bed, and they slept in one of our beds. So but he modeled for me that and taught me, and that's why I'm saying that it's so important that we as parents, and particularly as fathers, model for our children. One thing to say is do as I tell you, but it's another thing to say, watch what I do and do it. And I think that's what's missing sometimes in some of our homes.
Yeah. Okay.
I think sometimes people don't realize the power of what our children learn from what they see. I'll never forget, many years ago, I was asked to counsel a guy, and what had actually happened is he'd run away. He and his wife had an argument, and he gave her a flat hand, and then he ran away. And they eventually found him in the veld, badly dehydrated and in serious condition. And his doctor phoned me up and asked me if I wouldn't go and see him in hospital. He said, this guy's psychological problem. Anyway, when I spoke to him, he said that he grew up in a home where his father used to physically abuse the mother. And when he was about 16, and he was a good, strong guy. I mean, he was a well-built young man. And his father came home drunk, started beating his mother up, and he smacked his father, knocked the guy unconscious. And his mother said to him, look, you better get out of the home because your dad's going to kill you. And anyway, he went and lived with an uncle of his mom's brother. And they sort of kept him going for the last few years. But he says he swore that he would never, ever raise his hand to a woman. And then he got married, and they were happily married. They had 2 little kids. And then one day they landed up in an argument, and his wife was probably a bit hormonal, and she wasn't very reasonable, and they were just getting absolutely nowhere. And the argument wasn't being resolved, and he smacked her. And so he said, it's genetic, it's inside of him. And I said to him, it's not genetic. What has happened is it's a behavior that you've learned because you saw your dad do it. Yeah. I said, now let's teach you a different way of doing it. And that's what we spent, just showing that there's a different way. And I thank the Lord for that. I grew up in a home like Mike, where I never, ever heard my father shout at my mom, not once. I know they used to have arguments and disagreements. They used to go into the bedroom, and I could hear my mom's voice. Her decibel level used to get higher. Never heard my dad, never, not once. And I'm so thankful that, because that was an example. I've never had a desire to physically abuse my wife at all, because I never saw it. And I just thank the Lord for that.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. I think that it's such an important aspect, growing up in a home where, I'll never forget the day my dad died. That's my stepfather. My own father died when I was 3, but my stepfather came into our lives when I was 7. And what a powerful influence he had as a godly man. But I will never forget how he demonstrated for us the respect for my mother. We could get away with a lot of things, but don't cheek my mother. Don't, get fancy, with it. And my dad would climb all over us, And when I say climb all over us, I mean my father never, ever, ever disciplined us in a rage. He would send us to our room, and then he would come in there and he would explain to us the reason why, giving biblical reasons why he was going to give hiding. And I'll never forget on one occasion, he came in and he said to me, my boy, you need to understand, this hurts me far more than it's going to hurt you. Being a smart aleck, I said to him, well, Dad, it's fine. I'll let you off. You don't have to do this. Well, that wasn't the right answer. I learned that very quickly. But he disciplined us, and he explained why. And I could ask him, how many am I going to get? And he'd tell me, 3 for this crime, 4 for that crime, and that's how it went, And so I learned never, ever to lay a hand. As far as my father was concerned, to lay a hand on a woman was the most cowardly, disgusting thing a man could do. And I grew up believing it and learning that.
Yeah, amen.
That was the example he gave to me, and I'm grateful for that.
Okay. We have a question here from Greg, if I can address it to you guys quickly. He says, thanks for this. There's a question. We'd love to hear our perspectives. He's a divorcee, and his marriage ended in 2013. They decided to end things amicably, and he'd like to know, can he remarry? Would someone like to address that one?
Sorry, I'm battling to hear, Phil. Did you say that his marriage ended in divorce and it ended amicably?
Ended amicably, and he's asking, can he remarry?
Can he remarry? Yeah, okay. I think we need to understand that God does view divorce in a very serious light. And I don't want to in any way diminish that. If you read the scriptures right the way through, he makes it quite clear. In fact, in Malachi, he said, I hate divorce. So I think we need to get that on the table first. But I have over 40 years of pastoral ministry. I have watched the pain of people who've gone through divorce for various reasons. Let's just put it that way. And I have come to the place where I don't believe that divorce is the second unforgivable sin. Okay, we know the one forgivable sin, and sometimes we try to make out that divorce is the second unforgivable sin. Now, having said that, I'm not saying that people should enter into a second marriage quickly or unadvisedly. In fact, we ran a course, divorce care, and we've run that course 3 or 4 times, Irene and I, and they will make it quite plain that remarriage is a possibility. But I know that it horrified many on the course when they said you shouldn't even consider it for 4 years. That's a long time, but it shows you the kind of time that's needed to bring about healing. Now, there are people who disagree with me, and I accept that. But yeah, that's my position. I don't believe that divorce ends everything in life, that you are condemned to whatever people think. I think divorced people are some of the most hurting people. When your spouse dies, you have a funeral, you bury them, and you move on. The problem with divorce is it's the same thing. The relationship dies, but the corpse keeps walking around. That's the problem. And it's very difficult because it depends on when the divorce takes place. You've got all sorts of things where you are connected through children and through other situations where you have to come back together again. So, I've seen the pain, the terrible pain that divorced people go through. So that's just my 2 cents worth.
I think it's worth mentioning as well that God hates the sin, not the sinner. So the divorce is something that God hates, but the divorcee, God still loves incredibly.
Absolutely.
He hates the sin because of what it does to us, and that's the case with all sin. It's all of the commandments are there to protect us, to help us, and breaking them, it hurts us, and that's what God despises about it. It hurts him is seeing us in pain.
I think one of the points that we often miss in this whole debate about divorce and remarriage is that Jesus didn't make an issue of remarriage. In fact, when we look at the Old Testament, the purpose of divorce was to allow people to get remarried. Divorce totally ended a marriage relationship. A man had to give his wife a letter of divorce, and that meant that marriage was totally ended. She could get remarried because he'd given her that bill. And Jesus, when he was asked by the Pharisees about this whole thing, I think what he was saying was that remarriage is not the issue. The issue is the divorce. Is your divorce valid? People get divorced for any and every reason, and when they do that, it's going to happen again and again and again.
Absolutely.
I think that marriage is a more important thing than the actual divorce. If people would be a little bit more careful about who and when and how they got married, we'd end up with a lot less divorces. I look at young people, and Mike does. Mike does a lot of counseling right now for pre-marriage counseling, preparing people. And if we don't enter into that marriage with the right kind of mindset, we think that divorce is a way out. My wife and I have been married now for about 47, going on 48 years. And in that time, I can honestly say, I've never thought of divorce once. I always used to joke and say I've often thought of grievous bodily harm on many occasions, and maybe murder once or twice, but never divorce. it just hasn't entered my thinking. When we have problems and when things have arisen in our marriage and that seems to threaten our very relationship, we've sat down and we've found a way to solve it, because I believe that there is always a solution. And if people would just have a different attitude to that. Now, I can't remember this guy's name. Sorry? Greg. Greg says it was an amicable divorce. I'm glad that it was amicable. I mean, that makes a very big difference. And it was 7 years ago, so he's been divorced for some time, and maybe he doesn't have the pain and all the hurt and disappointment that goes on. But if you try and drag all of that stuff from a previous marriage into a new marriage, that's a recipe for great unhappiness and disaster. It's something one would need to speak to him about personally. I don't think that there's a blanket rule, but as you said, Phil, and as Mike said, it's not the second unforgivable sin. It's not. God can forgive the sin of divorce and the failure of a marriage. And having said that, Jeremiah says a very interesting thing. Jeremiah chapter 3. God divorces Israel, gives her a bill of divorce, sends her away. But when we look at the end of times, he remarries her because Jesus had to die in order for that to happen. But God says he hates divorce, but he recognizes the fact that sometimes a relationship can break down so badly that there is no way to fix it. And of course, the thing that causes the divorce in Jeremiah chapter 3 is Israel's spiritual adultery. They were totally unfaithful to the Lord. And sometimes when you get that in a marriage, well, then sometimes it lands up in divorce. And there are different ways in which one can be unfaithful as well. And I think we've got to recognize that. Anyway, that's enough from me.
Well, I've got another question here. It's a bit of a more of a theological one, I suppose, behavioral, I suppose. Mahendra says, why do so many preachers use allegorical interpretation and take verses out of context and claim it as truth for themselves? For an example, to put women down.
To put women down?
Yeah. I'm thinking
wow.
He's probably thinking about Corinthians, the woman is subservient to man, taking those verses out of context and using them to justify things. I don't think anyone, I haven't seen that happen with us. It does happen.
It does happen, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just important for us as believers to be wise and recognize when people are doing that.
I really believe that a lot of especially what Paul writes to Timothy, I think is grossly misunderstood. And if you look at in context, also in Corinthians, one of the problems that you have in Greek is that the same word for husband is a word for man. So, and like in Afrikaans, they speak about man, which either means a man or it means my husband. And Corinthians and Timothy, you can interpret in exactly the same way. And in fact, if you look at it as him talking about a husband and a wife, I think it makes an awful lot more sense. He says a wife, if she's got a question, mustn't shout it out in a church. And that was a cultural thing. She must rather ask the man at home. I think obviously talking about his husband. And the wife doesn't have to be subservient to men. I really don't believe that. The only structure that God gives us for a home is for a man to be the head of the home. And that's not a dictator. It's not a horrible, unloving person. It's an entirely different kind of thing. What Paul writes to men is he says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loves the church. That's the standard of love that God wants the head of the home to have. And if we can be a head in that sense, it just makes such a difference. I don't believe in putting women down. I really don't. In fact, I'm so thankful for my mother. And I'm so thankful the role she played in my life and in our lives. I'm so thankful for my wife. I mean, I wouldn't be the person I am today if it wasn't for my wife. There's just no doubt about that in my mind. I just know it for a fact. And I thank the Lord continuously for my wife and for the role that she's played in my life. And I mean that. I'm saying that with every bit of honesty that I have. Come on, Mike.
Yeah, I think you know what I missed the original question, but just from what I'm picking up from what Errol's saying, I think you know what he's just related. You know, Ephesians says, you know, husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church. He says that first, and you know, and when how did Christ love the church? That was his bride. He gave his very life for it. Now, if a wife knows that her husband loves her like Christ loved the church, in other words, loves her to the point where he will lay down his very life for her, that means that there's nothing he won't do for her and for her well-being and for her advancement. Now, when a wife knows that a husband loves her like that, that kind of woman would be quite happy to submit to that kind of man because she knows that he has got her best interests at heart. And if you take those scriptures, we always love to quote, you know, wives be in subjection to your husband and all things. They love to quote that, but they don't take the parent part of that or the pairing part of that. As Christ loved the church, husbands love your wives. And I think when you put the two together, it's got a very workable and lasting solution.
Yeah, for sure.
I hope that answered your questions, guys. If you have any more, just drop them down. We'll keep chatting for another couple of minutes. So, yeah, so we haven't lost anyone. So,
no, that's good. This is a new experience, and you know, it's this coronavirus thing has been a real challenge. We have to be honest about that, and we don't always know what's going on. I don't believe all the reports that I get. There's so many contradictions that are made. But the fact is, this is our reality right now. And we, as Christians, have to make the most of it. And Phil, I must take my hat off to you and the other techno geeks that we have in the church. I mean, you guys have done some amazing stuff. And you come up with some great ideas, and we're still reaching people with the word of God. And that's great. That's wonderful. And so well done for this as well. This was also your idea to get back into it. And I wasn't sure how we were going to do it, but you found a way. Well done.
It's definitely a new experience.
It is, for sure.
It works well. And, you know, we were talking earlier on. I did the memorial service for a very good friend of mine 2 weeks ago up in Victoria. And it was amazing because they did it online. And, you know, they had over 1,500 people log in to the live stream. So that meant that there were well over 2,000 people watching that service throughout the world, literally all over the world. And it just shows you, you know, where we have gone with this thing. Now, ordinarily, he was a very well-known and loved man. And, you know, we might have packed out the church at Waterkloof, but there's no ways that we would have had over 2,000 people at his funeral service. There's losses to all of this that we're only going to find out much later on, you know, the amount of people we're reaching who ordinarily we wouldn't have reached. And we need to thank God for that.
Yeah, amen.
Now, in this pandemic, you know, he is doing things that we never anticipated.
Right.
He's still in control, and I firmly believe that.
Amen.
He's not off his throne, and he hasn't lost control, and he knows
Right.
exactly what's going on in each of our lives. And that's what is a hope.
And he's still building the church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Doesn't matter what anybody says.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, just to Rob Vogt just put a comment here. It's just, he says, so agree about not putting women down, and agree with Errol that I wouldn't be half the man I am without my wife. Talking about
Yeah.
Laura.
Yeah.
Value her opinion despite it being often.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well done, Rob. Yeah.
Well, we're hoping to make this sort of either a weekly or a bi-weekly thing. We'll just see how it goes, and kind of do a bit of a topical thing as well. You know, today we've done sort of families and family life. Perhaps we'll address one around business or ethics and church life. You know, there's various topics that we can kind of cover, and kind of do a similar panel discussion that we can chat to folks. So I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to be really valuable. Guys, thank you for joining me this evening. Let me just go back. There we go. Thanks for joining me. It's been really great chatting with you. It's almost 40 minutes so far. It's really flown past.
Sure. Wow. Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Phil. Great job.
So Mike Willemsen just asked any news on opening the church. Mike, we're busy chatting about options there. We're obviously limited to 50 people at a time. And even that is vastly different to the sort of church experience that we've had in the past. We're not allowed to even take part in worship. There can't be open singing during the church service. So we're just kind of discussing, as you know, within the church leadership and amongst the pastors, on what that would look like. We know that there are challenges for people accessing our services online. So we're trying to really try hard to find a solution that will be practical, safe, and in line with the regulations and the spirit of the regulations that government has asked us to abide by. Yeah, so stay tuned. We'll announce that as soon as we make a decision, then I will let you know. So hope that answers it.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, thank you guys, and thank you guys for watching and tuning in. It's been really good to be able to interact with you again, and even though it's through a screen, we love you guys and miss you greatly. If you haven't done so yet, just hit that little like button down the bottom there. Subscribe to us here on YouTube. Like us on Facebook. Yeah, all of our content kind of goes out in those places. We do also have the new WhatsApp line, our NSC News WhatsApp line. If you'd like to, we'll be posting audio of the trivial questions every morning. A much smaller version, so it saves your data. Mike's Happy Homes that we've been chatting about today. Text of that. Various, you know, just all the content that we produce, we're putting out on that in a data-friendly manner. You can choose to download it and get notifications as it happens. So if you'd like to subscribe to that, just send a WhatsApp message to 073 510 2771. That's 073 510 2771. And just write in there the word nude and we'll get you added onto there. Guys, thank you. It's been a really great evening. I've thoroughly enjoyed getting back into this. Us chatting. Errol, especially, I know we have we used to have our almost daily chats, eh?
Yeah, right.
Great just to see you guys and catch up again.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you very much.
Love you guys. Yes.
Cheers.
Yes.